Hi, my name is Lisa. I collaborated with Kitsby to create the coconut Kinako pie kit, and I've been living in New York City since 2005, born and raised in South Carolina. Currently, my husband and I run the company ChaBay. I created this because Amy of Kitsby came up and offered me this collaboration. I wanted to make sure as a pastry chef that I could create something that home chefs would always succeed at. Like, it would be a fail-proof, delicious, new thing, introducing new flavors. And there was no grand plan behind the inspiration. It's more of an intersection of what was happening in my life at that moment and all the things behind that came up. So at that time when the offer came in, I was working on my own, for ChaBay, my company. I was working on developing another dessert using roasted soybean flour, so that was on my mind. And I thought this would be a good way to introduce this flavor to a wider audience. So that happened. So the history of Kinako is very long. It is a very Asian ingredient. We tend to know it today as a Japanese ingredient, typically used in desserts, like sprinkled over mochi and things. But it was actually used all over Asia, starting in China in 3rd century BC. And then it was roasted and it traveled throughout Asia. Now it's being used in Japan for confectionery. It's being used in Indonesia in savory applications. And even though we tend to think of it as an Asian ingredient, it is, because that's where it started. It traveled to the West in the early 1800s. It was used to make chocolate and also coffee. So it has a long history, but I don't think it's been celebrated enough. Yeah, traditionally Kinako, or roasted soybean flour, is used as sweets in confectionery and sweets. So you can find it sprinkled over mochi, used ground up and mixed with beans, and to make fillings for things. It's still used in savory applications like curries. So what makes this dessert special to me, I feel, is that it's a very Asian ingredient, but I think it's nice to put it in the format of a pie. I grew up in the South, so coconut cream pie is a huge deal down South, and it's just something, I just love making pie. And I like making simple desserts that aren't too fussy and let each flavor kind of have space to be what it is, which I think is a kind of a philosophy for life. Everyone should just have space to be who they are. You don't want to overcrowd it. I thought it would be a good format for this flavor. So when I was making this dessert, I was thinking about my childhood. Growing up in South Carolina, my family had a Chinese restaurant. I think it's a very typical story. A lot of small towns have one Chinese family in it, and that family grows up. And growing up like that, your family needs to adapt the flavors to match the regional likes and preferences. So growing up down south, my family had a Chinese restaurant, but we also had this huge, popular southern side to it where we served collard greens, yams, and my favorite thing that we served was the peach cobbler. So peach cobbler and pecan pie, and I was just thinking of those things as I was developing the recipe. All the sweets that my parents wouldn't let me eat because they were like, they always had this idea that American things were just like too overdone. But I was thinking I could still make the sweets, the dessert that I wanted, in a way that wasn't overdone, but still what I wanted to see when I was little. I had always wanted to stay in the kitchen, as I grew up in my parents' kitchen in the Chinese restaurant, but my parents really dissuaded me from that, so I pursued a career in design to satisfy my need to create. When I got to New York City, I had my design job, but I was always working 2 jobs, maybe even 3 jobs. I was just like workaholic, but I wasn't being satisfied in my day job. So in the evenings when I was working at pastry shops and the weekends, it was just so much more satisfying to feel that my hands were creating something that was immediately giving satisfaction, and not only that, visual beauty as well, so satisfying the design aspect to customers, and that was way more satisfying to me than my design career. So how has growing up as an Asian American affected my view of desserts and what I create today? Growing up, I felt a huge void. There were not enough sweets in my life. And maybe that was also part of why I became obsessed with pursuing the pastry arts. I remember my family would only buy vanilla wafers because that was very simple and plain and not overdone. And I wanted to have everything. So when I was old enough and I left the house and I could finally get my hands on all the sweets that I couldn't get as a child, I realized, well, they aren't quite what I expected. The vanilla wafer was actually quite perfect. So I think that has influenced me to keeping things very simple, not overdoing things, but I don't know, there's a lot of things like identity. My identity as an Asian American, I don't think really is a huge part of the things that I create. It's more my identity of everything in my life that has influenced me. Going to France, growing up in the South, those are all great aspects, but I think it's more of everything that's happened, that's coming up in the moment, and how those past influences can, like, they're threads and they get woven in. I don't approach dessert thinking that I am an Asian American and I need to express these things, but it just comes out naturally in a way without being the forefront thought. So the revelation I got from creating this dessert was probably validation that I love pie. And I just created it and I was like, I really like this. And I feel that I really enjoy putting textures together and creating harmony, and I feel that this kind of shows off all of that for me. Okay, so the tip I would give you if you're going to be making this kit is to really enjoy eating it. You're going to, make sure you chill it. It's really good when it's cold, and I think enjoying things at their optimal temperature is really important. Leave it on the counter and come back 2 hours later. When you're ready to enjoy, take it out and dig in. I'm Lisa, and I hope you love the Kinako coconut pie kit, and I hope it brings you lots of pleasure and it helps create new memories for you. So don't take it out, leave it on the counter and come back 2 hours later. When you're ready to enjoy,